Set your marks.
Hi, this is Guido.
Hi, this is Harriet West.
This is Andres Vazayas.
This is Emily Large.
Hi, I'm Duncan Scott, and you're listening to the London Raw podcast.
There were thrills and spills and records galore as the second season of the ISL came to a close in Budapest last week. It was a creditable third-place finish for the London Raw as Cali Condors took the title in commanding style. I'm Steve from pubboy.co.uk. Bob, Katie and I have been joined on this podcast by Raw General Manager Rob Woodhouse to get his lowdown on the 2020 season of the ISL and also to look forward to what we might see in ISL Season 3. Back in the UK after 6 weeks in the Budapest bubble, we've got ISL London Raw General Manager Rob Woodhouse with us. Rob, welcome back to the podcast. Great to have you again.
Great to be back. Good to be back in the UK as well.
So you've had 6 weeks of ISL action over in Hungary. The final brought things to a close last weekend. London Raw finished third. Is that, with a few days to kind of let that sink in, does that feel about right to you?
Very much so. In the end, we actually weren't too far behind Energy Standard, but far enough to be a distant third, I suppose. But towards the end of that second day of the final, certainly the first half of it, we were in a battle for third and fourth, and we managed to break away from the LA Current. And I think we kind of knew going in that Cali and Energy Standard were probably had the best teams on paper of the athletes that were there in Budapest. So we were pleased. Third was a really good result. The athletes, the majority of the athletes, in fact, virtually all of them stood up for that semi-final and final in a big way. So that was great.
And it felt, looking from outside and seeing the team sheet, if you like, before the final started, it felt a little bit like there was a tactic that you were going to go all or bust for that day one for those medley relays, as maybe being your best chance of moving up the ladder a little bit. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. We rested in the women's. We rested Kira Toussaint, who'd obviously broken the world record the weekend before in the 50 backstroke, in the hope that she would be fresh to do a blistering lead-out leg in the backstroke. But look, Cali Condors had an awesome medley relay in the women. In fact, they were all Americans, and they, as you know, they broke the world record. So it's pretty hard to beat a world record-breaking swim. The London Raw team were fantastic. They really were, and I think there was a couple of personal best times just in that medley relay alone. But that was our tactic to really do the best we could in those medley relays and give ourselves every chance to choose the skins. As it turned out, we didn't win either of them, but we placed well in both those relays, and the skins actually worked out quite fortuitously for us in terms of the choices that were made by other teams.
Rob, how difficult are those calculations, and how does it work with you and Mel working out what you think is best for the team?
It's pretty much Stephen Tigg's very heavily involved as well. And Stephen's amongst the three of us probably the master at the statistics and the facts and figures. And we got a little bit of external help as well in terms of analysis. A lot of intuition, particularly with Stephen and Mel from their experience, and lots of wide conversations were happening through the rounds of the regular season, as well as through the semi-final, and of course in those last few days leading into the final. So pretty open discussions. We didn't necessarily agree on everything, but we always, by the time we finalised the team, we're always 100% behind the selections that we made.
Who has the final say on that then?
I don't think we've ever got to a point where there was a deadlock and one person had to have a final say. I guess Mel as head coach would, but I can't remember a time when there wasn't, in the end, agreement from all three of us on any particular thing.
And there was a little bit of switching around on the day. Was that a tactic in itself, or was that sort of thinking on your feet and just sort of redeploying people where you needed them?
A little bit of both. We knew that we had access to other teams the morning of each of the days of the final. We wanted to hide a couple of things. For example, resting Kira from the 50 backstroke. And I think there was a couple of things with Duncan Scott as well. Hide the fact that we're putting him in the 2 IM instead of the 50 freestyle, where the 50 freestyle man was a weakness for us. And so those things were decided in advance, but we kept those changes until late in the day, so we can just make them at a time. And you don't know if the other teams are really analysing these things at the last hour. We did a bit of analysis at the last hour, but most of those changes were done in advance.
And you mentioned Duncan Scott, moving him around. He was a big factor for the Raw in the final. He stepped up and delivered some fantastic swims for you.
Yeah, he was brilliant, just as he was last year in the final in Vegas as well. And Duncan really delivered. One of the big discussions with Duncan, and obviously Stephen Tigg was the ultimate decision maker on this one, was whether he would do on the second day, whether he would do the 100 freestyle, the 200 freestyle, the 400 IM, and possibly the mixed free relay. If he was doing the 400 IM, then the mixed free relay was definitely out of the question. But there was a pretty wide debate about whether he could do the 100, 200, and 400 IM triple. In the end, we opted not to go with him in the 100, and probably the deciding factor on that was the fact that Dressel was going to be in very close to world record form, if not break the world record. So there was every chance of him not necessarily being jackpotted, but certainly finishing well down in the field. So we rested Duncan from that 100. It was the right decision because he won the 200 IM and he won the 400, 200 freestyle and won the 400 IM. So we were pleased that decision was made.
You mentioned the jackpots there, which have had such an impact across this season. Did that have a big influence in your thinking across the selections? I mean, were there some events where you thought, well, we know we're going to get jackpotted, so we won't focus on that and we'll just make sure we fill the lane? I mean, one example that I know Bob and I exchanged messages about was Luke Greenbank slotting into that 53, just to fill that lane. So was that part of your thinking in every match?
Yes, it was, particularly in the final. With Dressel in the form that he was in, events like the 50 freestyle and the 100 IM in particular, there was every chance that even if we'd had our best athlete there and almost a rested athlete, they're probably going to get jackpotted. So it was just like, we're better off, if those athletes have other events, we're better off not using them. So 50 freestyle, Duncan could have done that, but it was the right move putting Luke in there. The target for Luke was to get under the cutoff time of 22.50, and that would have meant not losing an additional point. Unfortunately, did 22.58. It was a very big personal best for him because he doesn't swim the 50 freestyle very often, but he did really well. In fact, Luke was one of our great breakthrough swimmers. I know he's not a rookie after medaling at World Championships last year, but he was a great rookie for us this year and a fantastic addition to the team.
Well, he set 3 British records in the 200 backstroke across the season and a really big British record in the final. So, yeah, he was a big plus for you. You mentioned Caleb Dressel. What was it like watching him from pool deck?
Well, I'm a swimming fan like all of you, and it was incredible. Every time he got in the water, you expected something. And it was also learnt a lot as well. I mean, and even the number of the sheer volume of events he was doing, you could tell on the second day he was starting to slow down. And when I say slow down, him slowing down is still the best in the world. But the 100 freestyle, he was fatigued. He didn't get under 55 seconds like everyone hoped he might. But I think probably the highlight for me was that 100 IM 49.2 was just out of this world. And just to dominate what really was a world-class field in virtually every event was something very special to watch.
And we've already talked about jackpots a little bit, but what are your thoughts in hindsight on the rule changes that came in this season? With obviously the change to the skin selection and those jackpots as well.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest. Perhaps they can be tweaked. Whether they are tweaked or not, I don't know. I know there's talk of making the possibility of jackpots even higher in relays for next year. But the fact that athletes can break a world record and maybe get 1 jackpot point, whereas another athlete might miss a world record and get 20 jackpot points. There's anomalies in there which don't really stack up, and I also think that really means if you've got an absolute standout athlete in your team, that's pretty much going to win the match for you. I mean, not taking anything away from the Cali Condors team, because their depth was extraordinary and across a lot of events. But it was, when you look at the point score at the end of the day, it was an absolute whitewash because of the jackpots. And so, not a huge fan, but it's something we lived with, and I'm sure we're probably going to have to live with it again next year and recruit accordingly.
How much consultation though, Rob, was there on that, and how much will there be going forward for next year? Because it seems to me a lot of the swimmers don't like it, quite a few of the coaches don't like it, some of the team leaders don't like it, or don't like it in the format it's in right now. So how could you tweak it to make it fairer? I mean, if you took it out of the skins, perhaps, because of the situation, not on your team, but Joe Litchfield was doing PBs all over the place and was losing points in the skins.
Yeah, consultation. There was quite a lot of consultation throughout the season with general managers and the ISL executive, actually, in terms of season 3, about a whole variety of factors, from jackpots to MVPs to the format for next year to possible draft and recruiting. And so there was a whole lot of things discussed and quite a bit agreed, actually. Which was really positive. It was not the environment to make changes mid-season. So what was put in place ahead of the season obviously stayed put throughout the season, which was the right thing to do. You can't really make massive changes during it. So look, a lot of people are in favour of the jackpot. So I agree with you, Bob, and I'm one of them. It's not a huge fan, but there were a lot of people that thought it was great, and it added that element of intrigue and so forth. It also made it quite difficult to follow a little bit too for a lot of fans. But, I'm hoping there will be changes made, whether it's widening the jackpot margin so there is less jackpots or something, I don't know. We did talk about not having jackpots in skins. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. That's sort of something for the executive to decide.
Is there anything else you can tell us about what we might see in season 3?
I think we're going to see a mixed medley relay instead of a mixed free relay. There's talk about swapping those two over. I'm not sure about any other actual event changes such as that. Certainly from a recruiting point of view, that's probably going to be the biggest change. What we saw, and we, as I said, the general managers of all the teams, we had a lot of meetings while we were there, and I asked the question at one of the first ones after about match 2. I said, how many people are making a list of athletes they want to try and poach from other teams? And pretty much everyone put their hands up. But it was clear that athletes tend to want to maybe go towards those stronger teams. So we talked about a way of protecting teams and protecting athletes and so forth. And I think the league, I'm not sure when they'll announce it, but there will certainly be a structure put in place where teams can protect a certain number of athletes, men and women, in each of their teams. And it looks certain that there'll be some sort of draft in place, which I think is going to be very exciting as well. So that to me is going to be the biggest change in terms of recruiting. And it will also add a little bit of excitement to the whole nomination and drafting and recruiting process. And we all hope that will even the teams up a little bit more, because we do want a more even competition. And I'm not talking about having 10 teams absolutely even. There's always going to be stronger teams and weaker teams. But we don't really want to see 200, 300 point blowouts like we saw this year.
That leads quite neatly onto a question that came in from one of our listeners, Wiki Swims on Twitter, who wanted to know if you were already thinking about who you'd like to recruit for next year.
Yes, but this it actually changes things. I mean, we certainly, as I said, I was one of the ones making notes. Zach Apple would be good, or Emery Saki would be great, and various others. But in a normal year, Abby Wood, for example, we'd love to talk to her. But what we have agreed on is to not be actively recruiting, and to once this structure is finalised, and it's still to be finalised, then. And this will all be, I imagine, announced early next year, but there will be a process where teams do protect a certain number of athletes, and then every other athlete who is not protected effectively goes into nominates for what will effectively be a draft. So it becomes similar to many other professional sports and leagues where you don't necessarily get a say as to where you go. So if I'm Abby Wood, I think she was very happy at New York Breakers. So I'm not suggesting she would want to leave anyway. But if she did, it's not as if she can say, "I want to go to London Raw. I'm not going anywhere else." She either agrees to stay with New York or she doesn't swim in the league, basically. That's if she's one of the protected athletes. If she's not protected, then she nominates for the draft and away she goes. That's all still to be sort of formalised, but I think it's going to be something along those lines, which we really hope will give all the teams a chance to firstly protect their stronger athletes and then build on it with obviously draft picks going to the sort of lower ranked teams this year in the first place.
They did trial an 800 in Budapest. Rob, do you see that being included next year?
I hope not. I don't see what it would add to the program, to be honest.
So why did they do it? Was it just a bit of fun or what? Because
they did it as a trial to see what the reaction would be and see if it was entertaining. And they properly treated it. It was separate to the match. I think it was after the first day of the finals, and I'm not sure if it was ever televised. But they did it and introduced the swimmers in the normal way and things like that. So they wanted to see how it would look from a TV perspective. So I actually didn't watch it, but for me, I don't think it adds too much to the spectacle. But there will be lots of people that would disagree with me on that. So I'm not trying to be controversial.
A few Aussies, no doubt. No.
That's only my view on it. Yeah.
Is there any chat about individual teams being sponsored, or is that just too difficult with all the athletes with their own individual sponsorship?
There's plenty of chat about that, yes, and it is the way we need to move forward. I mean, we've been very lucky that the league and the teams and the athletes have all been funded by one person for these first two seasons, and but we need to commercialise both the league and the teams. Commercialising the league is the responsibility of the ISL. Commercialising the team will be a responsibility of the general managers. So from a London Raw perspective, that's one of the priorities for me next year, is to look at sponsorship, to look at other ways of generating revenue. We've got some ideas to expand London Raw outside of the elite team that competes in the ISL to something which is getting down into more of the grassroots and development areas, particularly within London and possibly elsewhere as well. So to grow the fan base and to grow the appeal of the team, and both from a spectator and membership and sort of commercial point of view.
Yeah, it does sound very exciting indeed. You spent, as we've said, 6 weeks in Budapest with everybody in one place, which in some ways actually kind of made it more of a spectacle, having everyone together, having consistency of teams from throughout the whole season, and building some momentum. So that was a kind of a happy side effect of how it had to get put on this year. So our fellow podcasters, Propulsion Swimming, asked this question to pass on, and they wondered whether that might be something that's taken into account when planning next year. Whether it's not likely to all be in one place again, but whether that might be something that's built on as being a real plus from the way it was staged this year.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm sure it will be. Certainly the talk is that there might be a couple of clusters. If you look at Budapest as a cluster, possibly not as long, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 2 clusters of 4 weeks, and then going to a final at the end of the year. So that's all still being worked through by the ISL, but again, that's something that the GMs had quite a bit of input into, and then a lot of discussion with Constantine and his technical team and so forth. So it's definitely the way forward. There was not as far as I know, there was not a team or an athlete or a coach or a staff member that didn't really enjoy the whole experience, and it was made a lot easier by the fact that we were all sort of within the sort of one hotel complex, 2 hotels within one complex on the island, and you could walk to the pool or get the bus. All the training facilities were in the one venue. The meals were outstanding. We were very well looked after. We were COVID safe. We were getting tested having those long things put up your nose every 5 days wasn't particularly pleasant, but it was amazing that everyone kept to the protocols really, really well, and that was incredibly well managed by the ISL. They did a great job with that.
Rob, I take it that you want to have a home fixture next year. So what's the timescale with letting the Aquatic Centre know about the availability?
Well, if there are clusters, then it's highly unlikely there would be a home fixture, because there'd likely be a cluster in one in North America and one in Europe, I would imagine. But there is, I'm sure, if there is a cluster, there may well be the possibility to take 1 or 2 matches away to a nearby venue, which could include London. But I don't think London would be set up to host a 4-week camp effectively with competition. It would just be too expensive.
Well, that would be a great shame, but we'll wait to see how things pan out as season 3 plans progress. You've talked about the great atmosphere in the team. We've talked about the great atmosphere in the team with all of the swimmers we've had on this podcast. That building that culture was obviously something that Mel's very keen on, that we spoke to you about at the start in terms of your recruitment. But it really feels like everybody pulled together as really one big family almost. Is that how it was like for you?
Very much so. We talked about family a lot. We even had a night where the athletes and team members didn't know this, but we gathered little clips from family members back home, and that was no easy task. This is from 12 different countries around the world, and had these amazing clips of their own family, and this was all played into one sort of 40-minute video, which had a few people in tears. That was 2 nights before the semi-final. We played this, and they walked out of that meeting ready to, they could walk through walls and do anything. It was so inspiring. But they were doing it for the people that they'd left back home and they'd been away from for 4 or 5 weeks, but also for their own family, the London Raw family that they'd come to gel together so well and supported each other. And these people, they're London Raw for life, basically. They're very, very close.
And inevitably, with a team sport, there are those who are less involved than others, who maybe only got to swim once or twice. Was it difficult keeping them upbeat and involved in that, or did the atmosphere just deal with that for you?
Yeah, not at all difficult. We had athletes like Darragh Green from Ireland, who he only swam in 1 match, which was the match we rested Adam Peaty for before the semis. Elliot Clogg was not expecting to get a swim at all, and we swam in a couple of the early matches in relays, and then we didn't swim him for a couple. We brought in Nakamura for the semi-final, but he had swum fast enough for us to give him a go, and Scott McClay was another one that they both were in the final, and that was a huge thrill for those guys, and they swam well. Those British athletes particularly that came in at the end when the Australians withdrew, it was great to see them contributing to the team, not just in the water and in their performances, and they all scored points, but also in the stands, and just you could see these guys training with Olympic and world champions every single day, and just the learnings they were getting out of that, and also out of the coaches and so on, was it was a great thing, and I'm sure that will lead them to bigger and better things in the future as well, from just having that experience.
For sure. We'll start drawing this to a close and let you get on. But is there a particular highlight for you from that 6 weeks, whether that's in the pool or outside?
There was a lot of highlights. I think probably just the way the team built throughout the 6-week period, which was exactly what Mel's plan was, to just really sort of not necessarily ease into it, but it was not about, and we did have a great start, but we knew that the regular season matches were getting tougher and tougher. We wanted to get ourselves in a position where the 4th regular season match didn't matter, that we'd sealed 3rd or 4th spot and a place in the semi-finals and a good draw for the semi-finals. So we managed to do that, but just the way they built, and then we knew that we had to do really well in the semi-final just to guarantee our spot in the final, and they came out, and from particularly those last 2 weekends, I think the way the athletes performed and the staff around them, the way they performed and built across that 6 weeks, it was not a matter of by the time the semis were done, we're all exhausted and we're just hanging on. We just couldn't wait to get to the final. It just kept building. And quite a few of the athletes performed even better again in the final. And I think that's probably the thing that was the highlight and the thing I was most proud of. And of course, being an Aussie, but also a half Brit, I like the way that we celebrated after that final as well. We went pretty hard and had a great time, which is what it's all about.
Sounds good. With that, Rob, we'll let you get on and thank you for your time again today. And say congratulations on a great season. We're looking forward to seeing what the Raw can do next year.
No, thank you, and thank you for being with us throughout the season too. I really enjoyed all the podcasts, and we look forward to doing that again next year. So thanks very much for your support.
Hi, this is Anna Hopkin, and you're listening to the London Raw podcast.
Okay, great to hear from Rob Woodhouse there with some insight into what we might see next season and his thoughts on the season just gone. But it was a fantastic final, Bob, wasn't it? Lots of amazing swimming. The Raw probably about right in third, as we thought, but a good win for the Cali Condors.
Yeah, pretty much what we anticipated would happen going into that final. And Cali had obviously the superstar of the event who won all those points. You look at the Caleb Dressel effect on that final. It was enormous, the amount of points he picked up jackpot wise, and just without picking up jackpot points, he virtually was almost like a one-man team. Not quite, obviously, with some great performances elsewhere, but the amount of points that he accumulated in that time just tilted the balance so much in their favour.
We perhaps expected, Katie, a bit of a closer battle between Cali and an Energy Standard, but the Condors had the depth, and really Current and Raw were left battling for that third place. And it kept quite close on day two. I mean, were you worried like me that actually the Current might sneak past? It was half a point at one point.
Yeah, there was a point where I was getting pretty worried about it. I think it was sort of maybe one of our relays got disqualified at one point, and I started to have a little bit of a panic. But, ultimately, I think we were quite a sort of comfortable third in both places. I did wonder if we could make it a little bit closer with Energy Standard after the semi-final. It looked like we had more to give, but those two teams were just too good on the day, and I thought we varied a little bit in terms of people who looked a little bit tired and people who looked like they were ready to keep going. Obviously everyone looked keen to do it for the Raw with their one more for the Raw, but I think there were some people with some tired bodies by the time we got to the final.
Well, somebody who kept on going and just keeps on going, whatever program he takes on, is Duncan Scott, Bob, who was fantastic again. British record in the 200 free and a victory there, and also a win in the 400 IM where he missed his British record by 2/100ths of a second. But he's had a great season.
And he very much is our Superman now. And as we project forward to Tokyo next year, I'm just wondering, we're going through the events he might potentially do next year, what's he going to leave out? And what's the timetable going to be for Tokyo and indeed for London? Because he can't do all his best events there unless he's going to do a Michael Phelps next year, because he's got all the relays to think about. He's got all the individual events to think about. Potentially he could do 8. I don't think he will do 8, but there are all events in which he could potentially get a medal. So, all right, we're talking short course here, but we know that Duncan is a better long course swimmer than he is a short course swimmer. We think he is on the basis of what we've seen over the last few years. So, if he's achieving those kind of things short course and breaking records and doing massive improvements, what's he going to do when he gets back in a 50-meter pool next year?
Well, it's something that we're all excited to see. I mean, I'm not convinced he'll do 400 IM long course, but he has a load of other events that he'll be very competitive at the Olympics in. So we'll wait and see what he shows up for in April for Britain's Olympic trials meet. Sticking with the freestyle, we saw another great meet from Freya Anderson. Katie, she set a British record in the 200 free with a big PB, and posted a ludicrous relay split of 50.44. I mean, she's really come of age this last 6 weeks, particularly as a short course swimmer, and we're really excited to see how she converts that to the big pool next year.
Yeah, I think she's more suited just with her height to long course, and sort of she's almost too tall to get around those turns really quickly. But seeing how good she is short course, I think just makes me more excited to see what she can put together long course. I think her 100 freestyle split was something like the second fastest ever, and it suddenly we're suddenly seeing her not as just a really good junior who's coming through, but a genuine contender for medals on the biggest possible stage. And I think a lot of people will have sat up and taken notice of her, as she was routinely going past Sarah Sjostrom and doing, faster splits than Abby Whitesell. And I just think people will know who she is and be looking out for her and expecting her to do something really good.
Still talking about the construction of her races, though. Is she still going out too slowly? Yeah, because she always seems to have so much on the back end. Is she pacing her races rightly?
I struggle with this now because I was outraged at how, in inverted commas, slow she was going out in the 200 free, and then she came back so well and did one of the fastest times ever, a British record, and I just now don't know if I'm in a place to comment that she's going out too slow, because she just seems to be getting it so right. I don't know if she went out faster, if she would be a better swimmer than Siobhan Horhy. I don't know, but she's certainly not doing it wrong.
I mean, she was out a lot quicker in that final than she had been with the previous British record she set. So the improvement was all in that first 100, really. So, when we spoke to her, she was still figuring it out herself. I think she's got scope to go out faster, but, sure, that will be something that she's working on in Bath coming into the next season. We've got a long way through this podcast, and we haven't even mentioned Adam Peaty yet, and he set another world record, Bob. His standards have been sky high these last few weeks.
What about skins as well? People said before the ISL started this year, he can't turn. He's not a short course swimmer. Don't expect too much from him in most of the events. He'll be competitive, as he always is, but don't expect him to be able to replicate what he does long course. Well, he pretty much did that. And skins, we've never seen him do before, really, apart from last year. Again, superb, absolutely superb. So, all the superlatives you could possibly lay at his feet are worth it, and some more. He is such a trailblazer, such a tub thumper, if you like, for London Raw, that you can't imagine that setup not having him as an integral part of it.
Well, we've talked about three swimmers who everyone will have known beforehand, or certainly British swimming followers will have known beforehand. Katie, who kind of broke through Raw or otherwise from a British perspective that you've enjoyed watching this season?
I mean, we've talked about her so much, but definitely Abby Wood. She was brilliant, and she would be so valuable to any team who wants her going forward. I think this is not a breakthrough, but such a valuable team member was Amy Wilmot. I thought she was brilliant. She just stepped up everywhere for London Raw, particularly in those early matches where there were, we were missing a few people or we were highlighting a few places where we were weak. She just puts her hand up, and she wasn't putting her hand up and coming eighth. She was putting her hand up and sort of getting thirds and fourths in events that we don't normally see her swim. So I thought she was absolutely brilliant.
And for me, Tom Dean. Tom Dean, what a finish there was to the ISL. Obviously, he didn't start the competition because he wasn't there. Once he got into it took him a little while maybe to adjust. Once he did adjust, those 2 400 free victories, that fantastic time in the 400 IM, and he's giving a star going forward, absolutely. And also Luke Greenbank backing up his long course form from last year in the individual events.
Yeah, I agree about Tom. What I loved about it was in the semi-final against Rapsis, he kind of went with him and then overtook him, and then in the final he had the confidence to actually go out and take the race on his own terms and then hold off Rapsis at the end. So he's shown versatility in the way he approaches it as well. So he did really, really well. Yeah,
I like the whole Tom Dean package. I think he's got the not just the racer, but I think that's the mindset of that racer too.
Yeah, no, fantastic from both of them. We heard quite a bit from Rob about what we might see in ISL Season 3 next year. We've loved this season, don't get me wrong, but is there anything, Katie, you'd like to see differently next year?
I don't think there's any need to have 2 relay teams from each team. I just don't really see the point of it, because it's just like tactically you can end up losing a load of points if you don't have enough depth to have 2 strong teams. Very few teams do have enough depth to have 2 strong teams, and I just think it means that too many people are spread too thinly. And it's fine, I think, if you're used to the NCAA system where you're just swimming different events all the time, have to get yourself ready to race, but the majority of non-US athletes aren't used to that. And so they'll suddenly find themselves, rather than swimming kind of once a day over an 8-day meet, they'll be swimming 4 times, 4-5 races in each session in 2 hours. I just think it's a bit too much. And I know that will deprive some of the relay only swimmers perhaps of a spot, and that's not really something necessarily that I'm keen to do. But I think we could have a few more teams, spread it out a little bit more, and just have one relay team per team for each of those events. I just don't really see the point of 2.
An interesting thought, Bob. I'm guessing you would like to see the back of the jackpots, but or at least taking out the skins. Anything else?
Yes, taking out the skins. Definitely taking out the skins, because I don't think they have any place in the skins, because you're going to get a situation whereby people who can't compete in the skins or fall away on the skins just don't really get involved in it, and it backfires on that. I think overall, most of the other things I really quite like. I don't think there's an awful lot of room for improvement, but the jackpot definitely needs to be looked at, because it has such a massive impact on the outcome. It has too much. I think it's weighting, if you know, obviously the word WEIHGT, is too much. It's too much in terms of the overall score. They need to pare that back a bit.
I just think that they need to, if they keep it, they need to look at the spreads, because I think it's had some unintended consequences with. I mean, you have the kind of cut-off time, and if you're slower than that, the team loses a point, which is intended to stop teams just filling a lane with
I don't have a
old
problem
person,
with that.
which is fine. No, which is fine.
Yeah.
But what's happened is that's intended to keep people honest, if you like. But it hasn't. That's kind of been nullified a little bit by the jackpot, because in some races teams have known they're going to get jackpotted. I mean, that 100 IM with Caleb Dressel, for example, every team would have known that they were going to lose their points pretty much. And in some events, they're therefore, they are just swimming through just to avoid losing 4 points for not having someone in it. And that it's just that unintended consequence that I think just needs the balance tweaking. But certainly towards the end of the season, as the graphics improved and the presentation and the explanation improved, it did add something when you saw the big things flash up, points stolen and all that, and the line coming in on the jackpot to the presentation. So I think it's probably here to stay, but I would agree it needs a bit of a tweak to make it a bit better.
I've got one more tweak to skins that has just occurred to me, which is I think teams should have a limit of how many times they can choose the same skins choice. So I think, for example, you should only be able to choose the same men's stroke twice. Cali Condors, I'm bored of seeing Lily King doing skins, to be honest, even though it works out. It's not a bad choice for London Raw. But if we're trying to make this an exciting spectator sport, how many times do you want to see Lily King win the skins? I think they should be limited to choosing women's breaststroke twice. If they're going to be that dominant, they've got other choices. They could do backstroke. Olivia Smoliga would be great. But I just don't want to keep watching it. It's just boring.
Well, there we are. We'll put that in an email to Constantine and see what he thinks. But,
Please do.
Yeah, please do. All right, let's draw this series of the London Raw podcast to a close. It's been a fantastic 6 weeks. We've loved watching the swimming, as I'm sure we've mentioned once or twice. Final thought on the season, Bob? A couple of words.
It's been very good. It's been a truncated one, but a very enjoyable one. And I think all credit to Budapest and to the Duna Arena, and indeed to all involved in the ISL for making it happen.
Katie, your final takeaway?
Yes, it's been brilliant. And I think it's amazing that a lot, particularly for the British swimmers, a lot of them were given the chance to train when they might not have been able to do so at home, as well as giving us some fun stuff to watch.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic event. Congratulations to the ISL for pulling it off in this pandemic interrupted year. But that brings us to the end of the London Raw podcast for 2020. You heard it first from Rob that maybe we'll be back next year to do it again. You never know. But in the meantime, we'll certainly be back as the Pool Boy podcast as trial season and the Olympics roll around next year. Until then, we'll all say goodbye. So thanks, Bob. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
And in the meantime, you can get in contact. I'll be on Twitter at Poolboy, or Poolboy UK on Instagram and Facebook, or poolboy.co.uk/contact. But until we're back with you next year, thanks for listening.
Hi, I'm Mel Marshall.
Hi, this is Rob Woodhouse.
It's Sydney Pickram here in Budapest.
Hi, my name's Luke Greenbank.
I'm Kyle Chalmers.
Hi, my name is Amy Wilmot.
Hi, this is Tom Dean.
I'm Minna Atherton.
Wagwan.
I'm Ale Atkinson from Jamaica.
My name is Annie Laser.
Hey, this is Freya Anderson.
Hi, I'm James Guy.
I am Kira Toussaint.
I'm Adam Peaty, and this is the London Raw podcast.
For more episodes, visit www.poolboy.co.uk/raw.